Alright, what's up everybody? I'm so glad that you joined us here for our epic summer. We have been having a blast learning about God's adventure of love and trust. And today is no different. Here's what I mean. When you love God, you trust God. When you trust God, you love Him and you love other people. That's how you live an epic life. Because that kind of life is big, bigger than just you. It's as big as our gigantically awesome, all-powerful God. And He has invited us to be a part of His big story. But it all starts with trust. And trust is putting your confidence in someone you can depend on. The cool thing is that we can always depend on God. Sometimes people make mistakes and they let us down. But God, He's a different story. We can trust Him no matter what. We can trust Him no matter what kind of problems that we might face. Because He's bigger than all those problems. In today's story, we're going to look at a time when Jesus and the disciples were caught in a storm. And that sure seemed like a problem. But maybe it wasn't as big of a problem as they thought. Do you guys think that a storm is a big problem? Or do you think, nah, no big deal? Well, what if you were stuck in the middle of a huge lake? Yeah, interesting. Alright, you guys are pretty confident there. But today, we're going to hear about some guys in a storm in the middle of a lake. So let's check it out.
Hey you guys, you might have figured this out already, but today's story is an event that happened with Jesus and His disciples, and it involves a storm. And you can read about it in the book of Mark, chapter 4. I'll give you guys a little hint. It had to do with a lot more than just an actual wind and water kind of storm. But let me back up first. I need Derek to come out here and be a disciple. Derek, would you mind?
Hey, thanks for letting me help.
Hey, no problem. That is a nice boat.
Yes, it is.
Alright, so, picking up the story. Jesus had spent the day by the Sea of Galilee, and a crowd had gathered on the shore to hear Him. And that crowd was so large that Jesus had to get into a boat and teach them from the water. He taught them about heaven and about how to be generous and to love one another. As evening came and the crowd started leaving, Jesus said to His 12 disciples, He said, "Let us go over to the other side." Now, easy enough, right? Hey, Derek, do you think you can handle that?
Sure. Sail across the lake. Piece of cake.
Good. I like your confidence. Just a heads up, though, you might need this. It's a poncho. And this right here. Okay? Alright. Now, the disciples piled into the boat with Jesus and they shoved away from the shore. Many of the disciples were fishermen, so they knew all about the water. They knew where to find the most fish, they knew how to avoid the places where the water was too shallow, and they knew what it meant when the wind started to change. That the quickly rising storms on the Sea of Galilee could be dangerous. Alright, now the waves began to get more fierce, lapping against the side of the boat, bouncing it up and down, up and down. Now before they knew it, a wild storm was upon them. Water was pelting them from every side. There was wind. Whew. There was thunder. Thunder. Alright. There was lightning. And there was rain. Heavier rain. Sweet. Alright. There were huge waves. I guess we'll just have to use our imagination for the waves. But anyway, the waves were rising high above them, crashing over the boat as the water poured in. The boat was filling up and they were about to sink. The disciples must have been terrified, right? Wet and terrified. At any moment they were going to sink and drown. But there was one person on board who could do something. And he was in the back, sleeping on a cushion. That's right, it was Jesus, their great teacher. He was sleeping through this crazy storm that was about to send them all overboard. Jesus didn't seem bothered at all by the wind and the waves. The disciples woke him up and they said, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" And Jesus stood and shouted into the storm, "Quiet, be still." And suddenly there was silence. The winds died down, the waves were calm, the rain stopped. The disciples could not believe their eyes. Once again, they had underestimated the awesome power of their Lord. And Jesus looked at them and said, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" Well, the disciples were left to think about what had happened. Jesus made their big problem seem so small, and it made them wonder, if he could control the wind and the waves, was there anything he couldn't do? All right, guys, let's give Derek a big hand. Here, you can dry off. All right, thank you very much, Derek. I appreciate it, man. Now, the challenge is the same for you and me as it was for the disciples. We need to trust God in the middle of the storm. Think about it. The disciples knew that Jesus, the Son of God, was in their boat. But it was still so hard for them to trust him in the moment because all they could see were those crashing waves and their boat filling up with water. And it's the same for us. Okay, maybe we aren't on a boat in the middle of a huge storm, but we do find ourselves in tough situations, right? Now, life can throw some pretty big storms at us, like maybe your family's not really getting along lately. Or maybe there's a kid at school who keeps picking on you. Or maybe someone you love is really sick. We don't know what God is going to do in the middle of those tough situations. But you know what? We can be sure that he's right there with us, just like he was in the boat with his disciples. And those problems that happen to us, well, they don't ever take God by surprise. He's bigger than any hard thing that might happen in your life. He'll help you through it. He'll be right by your side, no matter how bad it might be. If you want to trust God in those situations, you have to remember that he's always in control. That's what it means to trust him, to depend on him, and to put all your confidence in him. You know, you can do that with all your heart, because no matter what the problem might be, he's bigger. So remember this. I can depend on God because he's bigger than my problems. One more time, guys. I can depend on God because he's bigger than my problems. All right. See you guys next week.
I'm trusting God with my problems. You know why? Because he's bigger. Right now, you know, Derek's biggest problem is the fact that his clothes are soaking wet. But I know real problems, real storms, they're unfortunately a part of life. When those things happen, we can either panic and live in fear, or we can choose to trust and rely on God, the God that loves us and knows exactly how we feel. We can always depend on him. We can trust that he's in the boat with us, and that he's bigger than all the craziness that we have to face. Our memory verse will help you remember that too. All right, remember it's Matthew chapter 22, verses 37 and 38. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. If we keep our minds on God and we love him first and foremost, then it helps us remember that he's with us, even in the middle of big, tough problems. And that helps us trust him the way that he wants us to. All right, you guys, you have a good week. Have a good week trusting God.